Hi, folks. Eric from Hit Subscribe here, and today I am doing yet another question in this series that I do, which is Freelancer Q&A. So far, so good with my newly aligned mic position. It took me, I don't know, 6 years to figure out that it's probably better to have it in front of me for like volume consistency. Yeah, I'm really good at this AV stuff. So anyway, today's question is, can you make a living selling info products as a tech expert? And once again, as I work through the dead tech backlog in more detail, more often than not, I have the verbatim question here in front of me. This one is a little longer, but I think it might help to read it just for some context. And then I'll also explain what an info product is and get into my answer there. So the question is, over the last couple of years, I've been trying out producing high quality courses and articles on my website, both audio and video, focusing mainly on the Java and Spring ecosystem. I also took the time to interview, email, and chat with quite a lot of people from that space and to know people like Eugene, that me, Eric, interviewed for your book. The gist is that while this whole area seems to work for some people, it seems to me it is insanely tough to make a living out of it, i.e. selling an article a couple hundred times for $10 each is better than selling it to one or two friends, but it certainly doesn't allow you to live in a major European city and support a family. My question is really broad, but do you think this can be pulled off business-wise instead of leading to more recognition as a tech expert, uh, hence more consulting jobs? So, sorry, this is not the question asker anymore, but unpacking that a little in case it's not clear. The question is, can this work, like creating these courses and articles and so on, lead to something economically viable without just that being more consulting? I.e., are programmers maybe simply not willing to pay a certain amount of money to get awesome, complex knowledge condensed into a shorter article that saves them tons of time and frustration? So, rolling all that up to me, I'm reading that question as basically, can you make a living selling info products as a really knowledgeable and expert software engineer? So first of all, let's define, before I answer this, let's define what an info product is. And basically the way I would define this is that it is it can be in different media, but it is a self-serve kind of piece of content. So that could be like a Pluralsight training course, or it could be an ebook or an actual physical book or a video course or something along these lines. And the idea is you're selling something usually for a relatively low ticket price that the audience buys and goes through asynchronously. So I think of the kind of, mainstays of this in tech are going to be whether you're marketing it yourself or selling it through like Lynda or Pluralsight, video courses, and then probably ebooks. Those are the most common types of things, but you could also have like certain kinds of memberships or whatever. But basically the idea is you need to build a fairly large audience of people who give you fairly small sums of money, and can you earn a living doing that? So the short answer that I'll give here is theoretically, yes. And it works. Just kind of like theoretically, you could earn a living playing in the NBA, and that does work for some small set of the population. I don't know that I would give those odds parity, but if you can't tell, I'm fairly bearish on the idea of making a living from info products. I think there are examples of people who have done this with some hyper focus, like I think John Sonmez definitely earned a pretty good living when he was in the early stages of like, for anyone familiar, he made like just tons and tons of YouTube courses, or sorry, Pluralsight courses in the early days of Pluralsight. And I think like by banging out like 50 some courses, he was earning a living at it. So there are people that can do execute this, I think. But I mean, that's where I'm kind of comparing it to the NBA. Like there are also people who execute playing professional basketball for a living, but not a lot of them in my experience. So I think for anybody watching this, it's safe to assume that if you're asking me, can I make a living earning info products? My take on that is very likely not. So let me go through why I say that. First, I'm going to start with my personal experience and observation, knowing a lot of people who have made info products either as a side hustle or tried to make a go of it as a full-time thing, or maybe even done that occasionally. I'm in a lot of like entrepreneurial circles, and have been on or paneled like the Freelancer Show podcast. So I know a lot of folks that are independents, and not just like freelancers, but all sorts of independents. So I have a fair bit of inside observation here. And my experience is that people, when they decide to go the info product route, what usually happens is you're you're making content for some reason, probably for the love of the game. So take me, I stood up a site, deadtech.com, and over the course of years, I built a fairly substantial audience just because I enjoyed blogging and sharing my information. Now, at some point, I can't remember, but I started to make Pluralsight courses and sell like eBooks, sometimes packaged some of my blog posts up into an ebook, or I wrote my book, Developer Hegemony. And so if you look back at those efforts, it was easy enough for me to get started with a little bit of side hustle-y stuff like making video courses and whatnot, because I had a pretty substantial earned audience already. So I turned around and started reasoning that I could sell content into that audience. And in the beginning, especially if you've built an audience, yes, you absolutely can. If people are following you and they've been following you for a long time and you've never asked them for money, if they're fans of yours, a lot of people are like honestly waiting for an excuse to give you some money. So if you roll out and are like, hey, I wrote this book, buy it for $20 or whatever, a lot of your audience will do that. But understand, if you have 10,000 followers and you roll it out and like 5% of them buy that at $20, that's a one-time, pretty nice payday. It makes for a good side hustle. The thing is, if you want to earn a living on that, you just have to go out and build that 10,000 member audience, a couple times a year or whatever it would take. So like you can only sort of monetize an earned audience once. And so I think this is the real mechanics of why a lot of people get started with info products and they assume that it can scale in a way that just isn't feasible. And that's because they've done all this hard work for the love of the game, building an audience. And then you go out there and the first few things you try to hawk to people, it actually goes better than you might think. And you're like, man, this is quite easy. I had no problem, getting this like little info product side hustle up to like $200 a month from nothing. Like that happened, just bang. Now I just need to quit my job and 20x that or whatever. And in my experience, just as personal experience and observed experience with this type of digital product, it is far easier to go from nothing to a little bit than it is to scale from a little bit to something meaningful, which is kind of the opposite of how it works in a lot of things like personal finance or whatever, where your first 100 grand is like cripplingly hard to earn. And then after that, it kind of gets easier. So I think that that's a big part of the info product experience. And my personal experience, when I witness people be successful starting with or featuring a portfolio of info products, they don't actually succeed with the info product. What they wind up doing is concluding sooner or later that I cannot make a living on info products alone. So what I'm going to do is use the info products as the bottom of a larger offering ladder, or I'm going to use them and give them away as free marketing collateral for some kind of bigger offering. So typical things that people will do once the info product fever dream is over, I see a lot of info product businesses morph into info product and then consulting services on top of it, because that's going to be much more lucrative, and or info product with training services on top of it. So those are pretty tried and true things that I think a lot of folks do. Another route that people who get into the info product line of work often go is to turn the info products into like more of a media company. And what I mean by that is you have the info products and you have the traffic and you're doing content marketing. So you're writing free articles below the info products, then you have like info products as part of a video course. What people might start to do then with that substantial audience and a little bit of revenue to subsidize other things is they transition to turning up the volume on the raw content and then start selling advertising and start selling sponsorship slots and start having partnerships of that nature. And this is usually a lengthier transition because I think what you'll see a lot of info product entrepreneurs do is get a little bit, I'll call it desperate. I don't mean to be, it's just like if you've quit your job and you're really trying to make a living with this hustle, when it gets really hard to scale up, you start kind of flailing around and you're like, all right, well, I'll instrument my website with affiliate links and I'll like sell not only my info products, but also this other info product about how I built my info products. Like you start kind of trying to hawk any little thing. And so one of the easiest things that you'll start to hawk there is selling banner ads or selling affiliate links and that type of stuff. And then I think what happens to a lot of people where they catch on to the media site is like, oh, wow, it's much, much easier and more lucrative to sell advertising and sponsorship to earned audiences than it is to try to hawk them some like course about whatever. So what winds up happening in my experience, all of these things share something in common. An info product business by its nature is typically B2C, business to consumer, because you're trying to sell to an audience in order to make the info product math work. If you're selling things for $50 or $100, you have to sell just like a huge quantity of them, which means that you're more selling them to consumers to get to that kind of math. Even if it's in a business context, like if you're selling a, Python modeling course or something, sure, your buyers might be buying it for business minded ish reasons, but they're buying it more as consumers than they are as a business. You would be having a business to business kind of situation if instead of individual people swiping their credit card and buying your $100 thing, you had an actual company coming to you and saying, I want to buy 40 of these for my team of folks. That's a business to business transaction. So info products are typically business to consumer. And what happens is you either give up and kind of fail out of that or leave it as a side hustle, or you find some way or another to go business to business because that's much more lucrative. So if you're doing consulting or training on top of info products where they're kind of more part of your marketing funnel, the people that buy your consulting or training are going to be businesses. Nobody is going to be sitting at home watching TV and thinking like, I could use a Python training consultant. The other thing is media properties, the people coming along to buy up ad slots and sponsorships and partnerships, also businesses. So what winds up happening is you kind of, as an info product entrepreneur, you start to back your way. If you're astute in keeping an eye out for opportunities, you back your way into where the real money is, which is business to business. And then you need much fewer sales in order to earn a living if you're doing business to business, because you're selling higher ticket items. You can sell a week-long on-site Python training for much, much more than you can sell this handy-dandy Pluralsight course about Python. So let me kind of go into what my take on the like underlying problems here is with this business model, why I'm so bearish on it and talking all this smack, if you will. So with info products, you have to realistically understand that you are in a constant race to the bottom. If you decide that you're going to teach people to do SEO and you want to sell video courses about how to do SEO, you're going to constantly be answering the question, why on earth would I pay you to do that when Ahrefs and SEMrush and all those people have free YouTube channels where they're teaching the same stuff that you are for free? So as an info product entrepreneur, a question you are constantly going to be asked either explicitly or implicitly as people vote with their feet is, why would I pay you for something that is readily available for free? And that's not a great position to be in. I mean, you might have compelling answers to this, like, oh, well, my mic equipment is much better. I mean, that's not a compelling answer. But you might be delivering more value, or you might bake in some kind of additional collateral. You might bundle things in there. There might be an actual value proposition that you're offering. You might be able to make a good case for that, but the perception is still there. So you're overcoming this objection where you're being compared to something that is widely available for free. And even if you can overcome it, number one, the price point is such that you're not likely to be on the phone with anyone. So good luck overcoming it in real time. If you're able to kind of overcome it on your site with the, obligatory entrepreneur squeeze page and all the testimonials and all that stuff, it's still a lot of effort, and you're going to lose a lot of people who aren't convinced. So understand that, number one, you are constantly competing against things that are free, and that's not a great look. Number two, kind of part and parcel with this, is info products are inherently low value offerings. And I don't mean that as a knock. I mean, like literally they're low in value. If you're selling eBooks, the price for that kind of thing, you don't really see eBooks like too often sold above $50 a piece. You're just constrained into a window by people's expectations of price. Video courses that are self-serve, I mean, probably below four figures, like hundreds maybe. So there is just this kind of expectation of their price, and that's the price, not the value. The value, I would also argue, is low. And again, I don't mean that in the pejorative sense, but think of like two scenarios. Let's say that, I don't know, go back to the Python example. Scenario one, the person who is taking the course, the Python course, wants to learn Python so that they can get a promotion or they can go get a better job that pays them more. Scenario one, you have a course that they can take and then self-serve through the entirety of the course and then learn a skill. And then they can go out and sell their new skill set to a prospective employer, and they can interview well and they can go get the job and they can earn more money. That's scenario one. So you do a little tiny bit for them and then they do a whole lot of stuff on their own, independent of your control, and they get a better paying job. Now let's imagine a scenario number two, where instead of selling them self-serve Python training courses that are for some reason better than the free ones on YouTube, you sell them a boutique kind of recruiting service where you go out and negotiate them a better job. That's a much higher value offering because you are doing it for them. What they're really after is a better job that pays them more money. It's a lot higher value if you are able to deliver that for them directly than give them this indirect, circuitous set of things that they can do, and then maybe they will be able to do it for themselves. So done for you is always inherently higher value than here's some stuff, go do it yourself. And info products are just by their nature not done for you. It's here, do with this as you will. It's really not my problem. You paid the $99.99, no refunds. So when I say lower value, that's really what I'm getting at. I'm not making it as a judgment. It's just that you're doing way less for them than a service offering would do. The other big thing with info products, in my experience, that's a problem with them by nature is that they tend to arise not in response to any market demand whatsoever, but rather in response to an info product entrepreneur asking, what do I know how to do well enough that I could teach? And what do I enjoy talking on about well enough that I could teach? So unlike a lot of service offerings or products where there is a listening tour and there is market research that goes into them and there's investor pitches and that kind of thing, where there are guardrails in place to ensure you don't just kind of go off into the market with no idea whether anyone cares or not. Info products go the complete opposite route. And I think in my experience, at least, almost all of them originate with absolutely no interest or thought to whether anybody wants to buy them. It's just like, I'm going to make this thing and, I'm going to pour a few weeks into it and I'm going to make this video course and I'm going to stick it up and I'm going to wait for the world to get value out of it. And that is a pretty low probability way to succeed at much of anything. Again, if you have that earned audience, you might get false positive and signal because you might just have people that are like, I like you, so I'm giving you money. And you might mistake that for like the market actually needing or wanting this. But in my experience, the overwhelming majority of info products come into the world as a function of the preferences of the deliverer of the product, not of the market. They're not responding to demand at all. And then finally, the other problem, and this kind of ties in, with the B2C or B2B thing, when you're selling info products, you're selling to individual contributors, and individual contributors tend not to have much money. And I understand full well that a lot of engineers out there, and there are individual contributors that make a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. But when I'm talking about having a lot of money as it compares to, say, like a publicly traded corporation that could pay you $50,000 for a week of on-site training, individual contributors don't have a lot of money. I don't care how much a software engineer is making. They're not paying you $50,000 for a week of personal training. It's not going to happen. So you are selling into an audience that in the grand scheme of what you could be earning does not have a lot of money at their disposal. And if they do, or if they're representing a large amount of money, like they're going to enlist your course or something for their entire department, they're no longer the buyer. So an individual software engineer isn't going to be able to single-handedly buy up like 30 of your info product for their department. They're going to have to go get approval from somebody higher up in the org chart. So you're talking about, with an info product business, you're talking about a market of people that do not have a lot of money at their disposal to give you. So that means that the numbers of people that you have to convince to buy your info product are quite large. And that tends to be difficult. If you want to earn a living, you might need to sell your info product to 2,000, 5,000 people a year, which means that you're probably going to have to build an audience of 2 to 500,000 people that reliably see your stuff each year. And that's pretty hard to do. So, all of those are the problems I see with the info product business, and the reason the phenomenon I've observed that I was talking about earlier comes to pass, which is that info product folks tend to pivot into other styles of business as they evolve, or they just go back to treating the info product business as a side hustle. So let me close out, I guess, by telling you what I would do instead. I've kind of mentioned these already, but if you are in info product land, you're in info product purgatory where you're making a little bit of a living, but it's not enough to live off of and you can't scale it up, like what would I do in this position? If you're doing that, you've probably got an earned audience, which is certainly something that you could monetize. It's a valuable asset to have at your disposal. So the first thing I might suggest, depending on how committed you are to going off on your own, think about forget the info products and think about monetizing the audience in other ways and treating it as a side hustle. I mean, I guess you could make an info product and keep that as a side hustle, but you could also do like partnerships or sponsorships or things of that nature. So I guess thing number one is the combination of info product and media property type business. Think about whether that's just a fun side hustle that you might keep and then never really regard it as anything more than that. Like, don't try to earn a living off of it. And it might be fun. I mean, like, for what it's worth, the book that I wrote, Developer Gemini, I'd have to go look at the figures, but like, I had a blast writing that. And I don't know, it still makes me probably a few $100s a month and like entirely passive income. If I had wanted to make that into a proper business, I would have needed to keep marketing that book indefinitely. And then, oh, by the way, written like 30 more. And then finally I would have been able to live off of that. But, it still like provides me with beer money and that's cool. So you can do like passion projects, turn them into info products and make a little bit of money at it, subsidize the cost of doing it and enjoy yourself. So that would be suggestion number one. Suggestion number two might be that like you look at and think about building an actual media property. So, if you have some info products and then you also combine that with like sponsorships and so on, do the math, but do the math scaling up with not so much info products, but like advertising deals and sponsorships and that type of thing. So formulate a business plan where you would turn the site and the content you're creating into something that would attract 100 or 1,000x the visitors that it's attracting. And then think about if you were to be able to like reliably execute that, could you earn enough money from partnerships and affiliates and all that kind of stuff? And if so, create an actual business plan to build the media property out to that kind of scale. And that might include going out and securing loans or investment and hiring people because you're not going to be able to produce enough content on your own. So that's a second thing I can think of. If it were me, just based on my experience and background, I think of info products as things that you ought to give away for free. So take the info products that you've made and then think about what more valuable business that you could build. And then you've already got marketing collateral built right into the mix. So if you were creating a bunch of videos and video courses, I kept saying Python. The actual question asker was talking about Spring and Java. So like, let's say you had a bunch of content about like getting started with Spring and how to use Spring for security and all this other type of stuff. I would think about using that content as gated assets to selling consulting services. Now that might mean going in and like assessing the security of some kind of organization that has Spring set up or whatever. So something along those lines, tee up like consulting or productized services or productized consulting. And then you've already got an audience, you've already got traffic, and you've already got gated assets. So you can get email addresses in exchange for people who download or obtain your info products. And then you could nurture them on a mailing list or sell to them. So that's something I would probably do, and or do training. So you could pretty easily, you've got all of this this content that's out there in the world. You've got the ability to create gated assets, and as part of that, you are inherently doing training. So it's a pretty natural upsell to say, okay, at the top of my offering ladder, or maybe you construct an offering ladder that's like. You also do like remote, like video training. And then at the top of the offering ladder is on-site training. So you can gradually phase out selling the info products. You could start out selling them and then like have, you can buy my ebook for $99, or, we can do a week of like bespoke training over Zoom for, $5,000, or I'll come and do an onsite for $20,000, or, whatever prices you land on. And then as you start to get serious business into the upper tier training, you can decommission the info products as paid things and then just give them away for free, because that the cost of acquisition on those higher ticket business items is definitely going to be worth it. Meaning, the return for giving away that content for free, given the value of the business is going to win you, is worth it. Plus, the optics of selling info products, it has a lot of entrepreneur energy. I would strongly recommend, if you're selling anything into the 4 and especially 5 figures, you don't want to also be hawking things for $49.99 or whatever. It's just selling stuff like that is a much different flavor of business in B2C than B2B. Like if you're successfully selling engagements for $20, $50, $100,000, it's the most penny ante look imaginable to also be selling things for $49. Like just give that stuff away. So hopefully that answers the question. To circle all the way back, I would be highly skeptical of your ability to earn a living over the course of your career just selling like articles and training courses to other developers. I just don't think it's a viable business model. And I say that knowing there are a handful of people like, in the comments or whoever, people are going to be like, well, what about so-and-so? Like, yes, it could theoretically be done if you are able to build an audience in the 6 to 7 figures and constantly sustain that audience. And you're a very talented creator and lightning strikes you a couple of different times. It is theoretically possible. But in terms of the likelihood of you earning a living doing that, nah. It's a pretty likely living is the tried and true B2B marketing funnel that's built out a lot. Consulting is a good way to earn a good living. Training is a good way to earn a good living. Building a media property is a good way to earn a good living. Those are tried and true ways to do it. I've just never seen info products succeed very much. It is absolutely like a tantalizing dream to think like I'm just going to create like video tutorials about things that I enjoy creating them about and then sit back and rake in the dollars. But I think because it's such an attractive dream, the space is absolutely and utterly saturated in a race to the bottom, where you're selling things on whatever for $5. So that's my take. I would not try to get into the business of info products, but there are viable things that you can do with that audience that you've built and with your enjoyment for creating that style of content. So hopefully that is helpful, and I will catch you all next time.